Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
And if you actually, live in that neighborhood instead of just being a landlord, you invest in the community a lot more.
What's their first step? Is it finding the owner?
Exactly.
Either they don't respond or they say, I like this home how it is, not being maintained, or
Yeah,
I don't want to do the things that I'm required to do.
Right.
Can the court then, get involved in the ownership of that?
That's typically when it goes to court, and that's when you have the neighborhood associations try to acquire those properties.
I'm Danny Wysentowski. Vacant homes. St. Louis has a lot of them. Approximately 25,000 across the city, and their conditions vary. Some might need a little work on their lawns, but many others have been left to decay, impacting not just one property, but also those around them, the blocks, and the neighborhoods themselves. With too many vacant homes and too few owners who care, those blocks and neighborhoods, well, they can be lost. But some neighborhood groups say they won't stand by and let what should be good homes become nuisances. And to talk about that effort, we welcome St. Louis Public Radio reporter Chad Davis to the studio. Chad, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Chad, your latest reporting into this issue was published just this morning, and it describes these efforts and really this challenge that is facing residents in neighborhoods in places like Baden. That's where your piece begins, with a resident who's talking about the place, his home, and what it was like in the 1990s when it was filled with families and businesses. Set that scene for us a bit. Tell us a bit about Baden and how that vacancy has affected it and to homeowners like the one you spoke to.
Yeah, so the revitalization of Baden Association is the group pretty much that kind of oversees a lot of the homes and such within Baden. So one thing I remember talking probably a couple months ago with people from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, which I know we'll get into them too, but they kind of represent a lot of these neighborhood associations. And, they were talking about how Baden, they had like just a large number of black homeowners decades ago. There's a lot of reasons as to why, homes started becoming vacant. There were people who were, just getting older and having to move. Some people passing away. That's part of it. But then, of course, discriminatory housing prices policies as well. Mm-hmm. But it goes to 2008, and pretty much around that time is when the foreclosure crisis happened, and we started to see a lot of people kind of just purchasing a lot of those homes. People started moving away. There are a lot of empty homes and a lot of people purchasing those. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, there's a couple of important, I think, variables and actors mm-hmm. who are circling this scenario. So let's maybe just define a couple terms here, because we're not just describing, homes that, haven't yet had someone moved in or they're undergoing a rehab. We're describing homes that have become what is legally known as a nuisance property. Correct. What is a nuisance property in this context?
In this context, it's really a house that, is bringing a lot of blight to the neighborhood. So, a lot of these homes might have like collapsing roofs and such, maybe overgrown yards, just a lot of broken windows, things that can be a blight to the neighborhood, but also could be, a safety hazard too. One of the things that people were talking about that I spoke with, when you have roofs and such that are collapsing, I mean, that's a hazard not just for if, there are, anyone, walking around, but even if there are, unhoused or people who are in there. So those can be issues for the actual neighborhood and for that actual area. So a lot of these nuisance properties, like you said, they aren't just vacant. It's not just a house that, maybe someone doesn't necessarily live in there, but they're keeping up with the property. These are really homes that can be a danger and a threat, fires as well.
Right. And I think you described the Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, which has been partnering with these neighborhood groups. Mm-hmm. So this partnership, you have a neighborhood group like in Baden, there's a home that has been vacant, and they're saying, we want to put somebody in here. We want it to be vibrant. We want a community to grow and not to potentially have this home have to be demolished, which is, I think, what you see on so many of these blocks where it's just empty, and not just one home being empty, but multiple ones. And that's where you really get into, a sense of losing these wonderful, important communities. So how does a neighborhood group like Baden, how do they work with the legal services of Eastern Missouri? What's their first step? Is it finding the owner?
Exactly. So one of the things, Peter Hoffman, who's the managing attorney for Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, one of the things he kind of talked about was the first step is really just trying to figure out who actually owns that land in the first place. And, they could be here, they could be in other places. Sometimes they're even international buyers too, which is, like around 2008 foreclosure crisis, that became a thing. But it's really just, identifying who the owner is, just to send a notice out, just to say, hey, this property right now is a little broken down. The neighborhood is trying to fix it. The neighborhood is trying to, make sure that, like you said, these homes are more vibrant, or that, they can be repaired so that someone can, move in. What are you planning to do with it?
Right. And so these property owners, the ones they're trying to get in touch with, there's a couple different kind of scenarios that have brought these homes into their hands. Tell us a bit about who, I think folks might just imagine, this is some distant property owner who's bought up hundreds of these or dozens. And that might be the case in some of those cases. But tell us about different ways these owners have fallen into these properties.
Yeah. So like you said, that's definitely one of the ways where, maybe an LLC or something has purchased a lot of plots of land or a lot of vacant nuisance properties around the region. But then the other way, and this happens quite a bit too, is that, it could be just a situation with an heir or just like inheriting the property. And Torrey Park of the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative and Peter talked a lot about that, where you have those situations.
Yeah, and Peter, you reference as Peter Hoffman.
Correct.
He's the managing attorney for the Neighborhood Vacancy Initiative. And when you talked to Peter, he said there are just a lot of factors that contribute to these vacancies. And as you mentioned, he pointed to the long history of discriminatory housing practices and the foreclosure crisis of 2008.
A lot of homeowners, black homeowners in particular, lost their property due to mortgage foreclosure. And then those properties were sold off, and investors started to get wise that, there's all kinds of inventory that we can really scoop up for pretty affordable purchase price. And then, over the last 10 years, the value has just grown.
And that was Peter Hoffman, who is the managing attorney for the Neighborhood Vacancy Initiative. That challenge that he lays out there, that these homes have been, fell into this large process, where does that leave them? And I guess what has happened to these homes over the last, 10, 12 years since that crisis?
So a lot of those places, kind of remain vacant. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of where the neighborhood associations kind of just like try to step in, where like kind of leaving off of what we just talked about, they'll send a notice or so to the homeowners and, ask them to fix it up. But in a lot of ways, those places or those homes may remain vacant. So that's kind of, if... And a lot of times it does happen where they reach out to the owner, and the owner is like, maybe, I didn't realize this, they can fix it up and they will fix it up. But then in a lot of ways that doesn't always happen sometimes. And that's kind of when it may go into the legal process if the person they're reaching out to, the homeowner, doesn't respond, or if they can't get a hold of them.
Right. So if that property owner, they discover either they don't respond, or they say, I like this home how it is, not being maintained, or I don't want to do the things that I'm required to do.
Right.
That can the court then get involved in the ownership of that?
That's typically when it goes to court, and that's when you have the neighborhood associations try to acquire those properties, where they'll say, okay, well then we'll try to get a homeowner who's also maybe a contractor, or at least a homeowner who can find a contractor. They can step in and try to fix the property up. And so that's when the title can revert back to the neighborhood association that's trying to, get the home spruced up.
And this is a lot of effort and legal wrangling, even just to get one home, perhaps out of the hands of one of these owners. And you spoke with Fatima Mohammed of the Hyde Park Neighborhood Association, and she kind of described, I think the impact of fixing up one home. They've picked up 8 so far, but she did say it's not enough just to revitalize one block.
I want it to be a legacy that they want. So I can have this beautiful home on a street, maybe that block is great, but the surrounding areas are in disrepair. So I've got to work to build the entire community up so that everybody benefits.
Chad, that detail that Fatima Mohammed of the Hyde Park Neighborhood Association that she brought up, she's got to work to build up the entire community, even getting a whole block back. It's just one block. Is that an uphill climb for these neighborhood associations?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think one thing, it seems that the process, to either compel owners to fix them up or acquiring it works, and it's happened, like it happened like with her. But I think what she's talking about and what a lot of neighborhoods, even people from Revitalization of Baden Association talk about is that yeah, you can get a block and you can fix up the homes on that block or acquire those homes. But I mean, for, a neighborhood, you want other people, you want, restaurants, you want businesses, you want a lot of different things there. And so one of the reason why they're trying to encourage homeowners to come in and to fix it is because if you're a homeowner and if you actually, live in that neighborhood instead of just being a landlord, you invest in the community a lot more. You're more willing to invest in the community, to want more shops, restaurants, businesses, and such to come in, as opposed to just being, a tenant.
Chad, these areas that we're talking about where these neighborhood associations are active, these are in areas that have, and please correct me, that they've not had a lot of economic development happening, independently or through developers. They're not, the way that we might hear about blight or about in other contexts is where a developer is trying to say, I want to develop this, many blocks all at one time. And, for these 20 or so neighborhood associations that are doing this work, are they working against that lack of development? Do they not have, I think, that the element of momentum of having other things happening beyond them just trying to fix 1 or 8 homes?
I think that the difficulty with a lot of those, with a lot of the neighborhood associations and doing this is that, you don't always they're trying to find, developers who are also homeowners or sometimes homeowners who know developers who can fix it up. So really smaller, developers as opposed to like large scale, projects and such, like developing an entire block. And so I think one of the difficulties that can happen too is if they're looking for a homeowner or someone who can develop, potential homeowner or someone who can develop, they're trying to find someone who has a record of doing this or who can do it on a small scale, just for that home and such. And so, that takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort as well.
Right. And it's not just, new homeowners to come in. A big part of this effort, as you write, isn't just about identifying these absent landowners or figuring out all of that, but actually preventing people who already live in these homes from abandoning them or allowing them to drop out. What kind of process is that to help these homes stay in the hands of those who have them now?
Yeah, so that's also a huge aspect of all of this is that you have a lot of organizations that are just trying to make sure that the people who are in this neighborhood stay. And so a lot of that, and the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative does a lot of that work, as well as like other CDCs, even like the North Newstead Association, which I didn't put in the story. But they're trying to just offer a lot of different tools so that, if maybe you're an older homeowner or so, trying to make sure that the property title, kind of goes to maybe, a child or something, someone who can inherit it so that it doesn't just kind of sit vacant. So there's a lot of different tools that some of these groups are also trying to utilize to make sure, hey, maybe people are getting older. Hey, let's see if we can try to arrange, property title so that it goes to an heir or things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Chad, in our last minute here, so tell us, these neighborhood associations are working against so many forces of history, of economics, of racism and segregation, where bank loans happened. And they are finding that people want to live in these places, that these are communities that have so much left to give. But it's so hard. What is giving these folks hope, or what do you hear when you talk to them about seeing their communities come back, or seeing the parts of them that might never return?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, I remember speaking with Holston and Holston Black, who's part of the old North St. Louis Restoration Group, which is a CDC. But when he was talking a lot about the former neighborhood, what it was like in the 40s and the 50s, and having just just a large number of, people, of course, who were within St. Louis, North and South, and, really trying to make sure that, trying to get the neighborhood back to a way that, preserves that architecture, preserves that history. And so I think that's a driving force into it was once like this, but, let's see what we can do to try to, replicate that or to get more people in.
Chad Davis is a reporter for St. Louis Public Radio. His newest piece is titled "St. Louis Neighborhood Groups Try to Acquire Vacant Properties or Get Owners to Fix Them Up." And you can find it right now on our website at STLPR.org. Chad, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate it.
Today's episode was produced by Emily Woodbury with audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our production intern is Avery Rogers. Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Our podcast proudly supports St. Louis artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.